All right. Hey, listen to this. To the choir master, a my skill of the sons of Korah, as a deer pants for flowing streams, so pants my soul for you, O God. My soul thirsts for God, for the living God. When shall I come and appear before God? My tears have been my food day and night, while they say to me all the day long, where is your God? These things I remember as I pour out my soul, how I would go with the throng and lead them in procession to the house of God with glad shouts and songs of praise, a multitude keeping festival. Why are you cast down, O my soul, and why are you in turmoil within me? Hope in God, for I shall again praise him, my salvation and my God. My soul is cast down within me. Therefore I remember you from the land of Jordan and of Hermon from Mount Mizar. Deep calls to deep at the roar of your waterfalls. All your breakers and your waves have gone over me. By day the Lord commands his steadfast love, and at night his song is with me. A prayer to the God of my life. I say to God, my rock, why have you forgotten me? Why do I go mourning because of the oppression of the enemy, as with a deadly wound in my bones? My adversaries taunt me, while they say to me all the day, where is your God? Why are you cast down, O my soul, and why are you in turmoil within me? Hope in God, for I shall again praise him, my salvation and my God. Send out your light and your truth. Thus reads Psalm 42, the opening of technically what is a book within the book within the book. It's part of book 2 in the book of Psalms, our collection of Psalms. Book 2 begins in Psalm 42, and it is one of the Psalms of the sons of Korah. To me, and I love the Psalms, the sons of Korah are among the best of the best. And part of what I want to say, I say a book within a book within a book. So it's book 2 within the book of Psalms, but it's a different book also because, again, and I don't want to go too much into this, but maybe we'll talk a little bit about it throughout our conversation. There is a set of Psalms called that are dedicated not to the choir master. I think that's a bad translation. I think it's not an accurate translation. But I think the Notseach, who is the Notseach? Now, what is fascinating about these Notseach Psalms is a lot of them have a first person, sort of a messianic. I'm using the word messianic to describe them. It's almost as if you were to write a guidebook for the coming Messiah, and you wanted to tell this coming one that there are going to be hard days ahead. See, we find a suffering Messiah not only in Christianity. People say, oh, that's a Christian doctrine. Not just, believe me. It's also found in the Dead Sea Scrolls. The teacher of righteousness, the Moreh Litztecha, is also one who suffers. And we find this in rabbinic literature as well. So it's not just a Christian idea. Well, these psalms that are to the, as it says, the choir master, it's not really the choir master. I think the Notseach, look it up, Nun Tzadeh Het, and Natzak can mean enduring. So it's almost like to the enduring one. Some might translate it to the eternal one. What if this is some kind of a book that a messianic figure might pick up and read from and go, hey, in the scroll of the book it's written of me, kind of thing. Anyway, just some thoughts as I open up our conversation today. I made a lot of points on this clash of Levitical clans that now we have to discuss. And some of you are going to have ideas, insights. Maybe you see things differently. If you're new here, welcome. If you're here every week, thanks for continuing to come. Your views are important to us, and they're interesting to me. And so I like to hear those. I want you to share some of your insights on this reading as well, because I have more to say. I always have more to say. But one thing I want to lead to, and I'd like to get to this at some point, because I made a big point about, according to the priestly writers, Seth did a great job on that illustration because it shows you have the descendants of Kohath, only the descendants of Kohath who are also of Amram and ultimately sons of Aaron, they win the day. Ultimately, only they, the descendants of Aaron, are approved to be priests. But the question becomes, is that something that reflects the earliest strata? In other words, were the sons of Aaron always, if you really went back to the time of Moses, is that the case? Now, some of you would say, absolutely. Well, what are your views? What are some of your thoughts? Anyone have any thoughts on that? Clody, welcome. Shabbat Shalom. How are you, my friend?
Shabbat Shalom. How are you?
I'm doing great. How are you?
I'm good. Great class.
I
missed the 10 last minutes. I'm gonna have to go back, but I wanted to share one thought.
Okay.
Because as I was listening and reading the parsha, I started to think that throughout my life I've been always wondering what is the matter with human beings that like to be so selected, the chosen one, the different one,
Yep.
the better than the others. And that throughout the Bible we see it since Genesis, and what Satan says to Eve, that you are not gonna die, but you are gonna be like God.
Yeah.
And then we see that Korah was chosen among his brethren. And different people throughout the history of the world, when they start to believe that they have blue blood or that they are better than others, then the things go astray.
Yeah.
And that happens all over again. History repeats itself. And I remember when I was part of Jehovah's Witnesses, it was very difficult for them to think that there is another people or another nation or another organization that might be saved, because they only were the chosen ones.
Yep.
And this exclusivity of we have the truth and nobody else, and we are best and we are the chosen ones, that has been bothering me for most of my life, telling you the truth.
Yeah.
And repeatedly God tries to remind us that we have to be chosen but humble. We have to be people that are seeking God, and we are seeking we are trying to keep the 10 rules, the 10 commandments, but then we don't think that we are the only ones that can make that.
Yeah.
That's all. The exclusivity. That's what I wanted to talk about.
Hey, that's a good point. I remember, and I don't know if they do this in Albania, when I was in school, before a sports event, we would all go to the auditorium and they would have the cheerleaders would get everybody excited about the game that's coming, and I remember they would do this chant where one would say, and forgive me, this is kind of stupid, but the example comes to mind. They would say, "We've got the Spirit. Yes, we do. We've got the Spirit. How about you?" And they would point, and then the other side of the auditorium would scream this same chant. So it would kind of be back and forth. It's all trying to whip people into a frenzy, but at the heart of it, it's we've got we, and you see this exclusivity, as you said, in politics. We live in a divisive world in every sense, and so this idea of conflict and competition is everywhere. It's on the news. And what your point is exactly right. What if, as a group, we looked for ways to get the job done? And at times, I mean, I understand divine order. I'm not suggesting otherwise. But whatever our job is, be content with it, and be amazed at what God is doing with other people. I'll tell you, and it's not just because Seth is here and he's my son, but when I see the talent and what he can do, it's exciting to me, because it's stuff there's no way I can do it. I wouldn't try to do it. So we have we come together. This group is a good example of that. I know within this group we have people who have other talents that can help advance our understanding of Scripture and how to live for God and so forth. I do want to mention, by the way, Clody, not just for your point, but just overall, I am monitoring as I can the YouTube chat as well. So I know that some, for whatever reason, are there. Maybe they don't have the Zoom link, or they lost it, or I see the notes. So just know Seth is right. I will also check the chat for questions, and so I'm looking. So I'll keep going back and forth. Thanks for your comments, Clody. I appreciate you. Hey, Karen, how are you today? Shalom, shalom.
Good morning.
Good morning.
Oops. Oh, sorry.
That's all right. There you are.
Here I am. I was just gonna say that I kind of I can understand why. What was the name? Amram.
Yep.
And what was the other guy's name?
Yitzhar.
Yitzhar. I can kind of understand their point a little bit. I'm still considering the belief that these are the Atenites who are leaving Egypt. They're leaving to worship their God the way they want to.
Yeah.
And and part of that belief is you don't need a priestly system to have a relationship with God. You can have one with him on your own. And here they are coming out into this wilderness, and then Aaron starts setting up the same kind of unelected, you could say corrupt priestly system that's driven by contributions, and requires them to give monetarily in order to support them.
Yeah.
So I can definitely see them having a problem. Like, we left Egypt to get away from this, and here you are setting up the same thing out here. Why, So I can understand their point, whether they were correct in the way they went about expressing that. Well,
Right.
that's exactly how did it go down? I don't know. But I can see their point in having a problem with it.
Yeah, let me ask you this, Karen. One thing that when I picture, especially this scenario as it's played out, where in Numbers chapter 4, verses 15 through 20, it's like, okay, you see pulls up, here comes the descendants of Korah, Kohath, and Korah and his crew, and they're told, you guys wait out here, just take a seat in the sand, and we're going to go in, we're the sons of Aaron, and we're going to go in and we're going to get everything ready. And once we cover it up, because it's too holy for you, you can't come in there. And I know some people are listening to this and they're saying, hey, be careful, Ross, that's what it says. I'm just looking at trying to understand the tension behind what leads to this rebellion. As Karen said, it's like they feel, and it could be that, I don't know this, but we know that it's not like every descendant of Aaron was this walking model of holiness. So it's not like some of them didn't say, sit down, Korah, we're here. Yep, that's right, we're here. We're going in, we'll get it ready for you. So there could be some of that. This picking on the other group, like we're more holy than you. It's I think about these things. What is really fascinating to me is what I brought up in the class. I don't know for sure where these priestly groups come from. You mentioned Aten, and there is a good bit of academic research out there that suggests that. So, could be, but we do know that of the 13 names in Scripture, in the Pentateuch, which have an Egyptian origin, all 13 are Levites. In fact, and I didn't look at the Hebrew spelling on the name On, O-N in English here, but I'd be interested to do that later. I've got it in my notes. I just hadn't taken the time, because what I think about is, the priest of On, related to Osiris. You wonder, is this an Egyptian name? It's very likely is an Egyptian name. And so there you have another interesting correlation between Egypt and the priest. And what really hits me is you've got Psalm 106 and Deuteronomy 11 that mention nothing about Korah. The rebellion has to do with Datan and Aviram. So what's that about? I mean, a lot of questions on this Torah portion, I would say.
Yeah. Anywho, that was just my thoughts.
Good thoughts as always, Karen. Thanks for your time. Hang around. Maybe you have something else and jump in.
Okay.
Todd and Angel. Shabbat Shalom. How are you?
Shabbat Shalom, my brother. How you doing?
I'm doing great, man. I'm doing great.
I wanted to add something to what Clody was saying about how when she was with the Jehovah's Witness, about how they thought they had it all right and everybody else was wrong.
Yeah.
It brought back to the memory of what we used to hear all the time at the last church we were at, when the preacher basically told everybody that the church is the new Israel.
Yeah.
And like, no, you're not.
Yeah.
Because one, you're not. I mean, if you want to say you're the new Israel, when you're not following the commandments, you might as well be. But
yeah. Yeah.
I just thought it was kind of funny when she said that. That's just the first thing that popped in my head was, but the church is the new Israel.
Yeah.
But another side note too, something you read a little while ago. I was talking to Angel about this. Let's see, Deuteronomy 31. When you was reading about the scroll of instruction.
Yeah, Deuteronomy 31. Right.
Have you ever considered the possibility that that have been the Moses scroll?
It's in my book. Yeah. I actually put that idea in there, and I think very strongly. So two ways to answer that. Number one, even if you take apart, you say, I don't know what this Shapira stuff is. Forget that. What we see in Deuteronomy 31 is what opened my eyes to all of this. It says that in Deuteronomy 31, verse 9, and then verse 22, and then verse 24 through 26, that there is a little scroll of Moses that was written until it was complete, given to the Levites and the elders, and said, keep this in the side of the ark, and and so forth. To me, that says that is a smallish book, not the 5 books of Moses. That is not Genesis 1 through Deuteronomy 34:12. That's a little scroll that Moses wrote. And the writer of Deuteronomy in chapter 31 is not Moses. That's third person. I mean, you know, when you read it, it's a narrator telling us, but this narrator knows something. The narrator is saying, hey, look, I was there. I saw Moses finish writing the Torah. Someone could have raised their hand and said, "Hey, hang on. This is like a loop. Aren't we in the Torah? The Torah's not done yet." He goes, "Shh, listen." It's one of those deals. But he says he wrote it to the very end and he gave it. What is that scroll? Yeah. And I think that's what we're searching for. And as I put in the book on the Moses scroll, I said, look, if this book exists, it could look very much like, and then that's where I make the pitch for the authenticity and antiquity of the Moses scroll. But be that as it may, whether it's that scroll or not, we're looking for a smallish document written in the first person that is free of all the anachronisms and later insertions and so forth, and a consistency. So,
because it was instructions, and it had the blessings and the curses and everything else. So that's why I said, I just when it clicked on me when it said the scroll of instruction, I was like, wait a minute.
Yeah.
The other thing too, the whole deal with Korah and them rebelling against Moses and Aaron and all that, just for some reason popped in my head of the old cliche of the labor workers versus the office people. Yeah. Because somebody like in my deal, I'm the one that does it all.
Right.
It's office guys to take the credit.
Oh yeah, no doubt. I tell you, I thought, I worked in industry for many years. Excuse me. And one thing I thought about, because I was, as an hourly employee, I was part of the union. And then as a manager, I worked with the unions. So I worked with several different unions by the time I left. But I thought about, when you're talking about these clashing clans of Kohathites, for one, you're almost dealing with different unions. It's like one says, okay, well, it's my job to do this, but I can't do this. And no, that's my job. You can't do that. And, it's kind of that deal. And there's some good in that. If everybody, I'm not making fun of it, if everybody did the same thing, and what if every Levite showed up and said, I'm going to carry the ark today, and nobody wanted to carry, the flesh hooks, or no one wanted to carry the curtains. Somebody goes, man, those curtains are heavy. Yeah, I don't want to carry those. I'm going to carry. You see the problem. It could get really bad. So I do think there needs to be an order and a structure, and everything needs to be in its own order. So that's a good thing, but I'm wondering at what place, at what time did these various rules and regulations come in?
Yeah, it is interesting, yeah.
Good stuff. All right, well, hang tight. You may have some more questions or comments. Please feel free to
I do.
You want to do another one now, or are you going to come back?
No, it's a little off topic from what we're talking right now, so I'll save it for later.
Okay, good. All right, Elisheva, Betty, how are you, my sister? You doing okay today? Shabbat Shalom. There we go.
Okay, here we go. Yes, thank you. Just a couple of things, actually, three.
Okay.
The first one is you said, how am I doing? On a personal note, some of you know our family's been going through a very difficult time.
Yep.
But I am, I'm rising above it, and depending on the strength of Hashem. So that's, if I can get through this. And especially wanted to note, and this does not have to do with your topic today, but what I have later does, that this is the first day of the fourth month. I don't really like to say the name, because it's the name of the deplorable Babylonian god. But, in history, especially Jewish history, this whole month has been a horrible, dark time.
Yeah.
And I think, our job is to be light, in the midst of it. Each one of us can be light. And then when we're all together, we can get through this.
Yeah.
I don't necessarily believe in, that it has to be dark. I'm just looking at history and seeing all the things that happened in this month and the next one.
Yeah.
So anyway, that's that. One thing that I read, it's from Mishnah, I believe, and it says that if you notice, the part of our eyes that we see through is the pupil, and the pupil is the dark part, and that's how the light is refracted. And so,
Right.
to me, that's a lesson too that God gave us when He created us. Then I also wanted to comment on what Clody said about the exclusivity.
Yeah.
I think, growing up in the Church of Christ, on the actual cornerstone of the building, it said established in 33 AD.
Yeah.
And those of you who are familiar with Christianity know the significance of 33 AD. And, the preacher preach, we're the only ones that are going to heaven. And to me, that is, I never could go with that. Micah 6:8 not only is that we're to love justice and practice loving kindness, but we're to walk in humility.
Yeah.
With our God, with our Elohim. And how are we walking in humility if we think we're the best of the best? We're not. I've read in Jewish teachings that if we walk around with like two pockets, one on each side of our chest, and one is like, okay, I'm lowly, I'm like a worm, and the other one is like, I'm a child of the King. And somehow we have to go around knowing that we are, excuse me, a child of a king. We're not really a worm, but we're somewhere in the middle.
Yeah.
We don't need to always think that we're the best of the best, because we're not. None of us are. And the other thing that I thought was interesting, and I've thought about this a lot, and especially with your teaching today, if we compare the blessings that Yaakov gave to his children in Genesis 49 and verse 5, he talked about, excuse me, Levi and Shimon, and how horrible, they were, because they were sons of cruelty, for what they did. Yet in in Genesis 40, and Deuteronomy 33:8,
Yeah.
it talks about Levi and how he is, how he was set apart. So to me, that just shows the forgiveness. And no matter what we've done, God can still use us, and He can forgive us, and He can make things right if we give ourselves to Him.
Yeah.
So to me, that's just really important.
Right.
Anyway, if you just read those two in comparison, it's really interesting. And Levi and Shimon were, well, that's enough. I'm having trouble. I'm kind of emotional today.
Oh, I can imagine. And you and your family are in our prayers. When you talk about, you mentioned the forgiveness factor, my words, not yours, but what I think about also in this narrative is this beautiful example of Korah. And Korah stands out as a bad character in the story, but yet
Right.
his sons turn out to be among the best. And I really like that lesson, because a lot of times people get, well, first of all, preachers and rabbis, and I know people may not like this, but I used to listen to a lot of heavy rock and roll, and when I was a kid, Ozzy Osbourne, don't throw things at me, but he said, I listen to preachers, I listen to fools. we've had a lot of that kind of stuff to where people have pushed down this idea that, you know, if your parents were bad, you're bad, and it just carries on. And yet the Bible gives us so much more of a beautiful path that says, no, you have it within you. Choose this day. Choose who you'll serve.
Right.
Choose life. Choose blessing, not death, not cursing. Choose the good. And that's what happens with Korah's sons. And they become, I'm telling you, if you read those Psalms, I read them again last night, just even as I was preparing my class, I read them again. I went home in bed, I read them again. There's some of the most beautiful poems, Psalms in all of literature. So very powerful. And that's
thank
that
you,
lesson.
Ross. Yes, I'm thank you for finishing. That was in my thoughts. I just couldn't get it out.
That's okay.
But, I appreciate it, and I'm reminded of it's a little bit of a misquote, but can anything good come out of Korah? You know, I mean, anything good can come out of anywhere.
Yeah.
Something good can come out of anywhere if we
Amen.
choose.
Yeah, amen.
So,
And just one more point on that, and I know you know all these, Betty, but you know, it's funny how the bad guys often turn out to be the good within the bad is what really stands out for me. Think about Rahab. She is among the people of Jericho, and yet she turns out to be in the genealogy of David. And also, if you think about Ruth is a Moabitess, and you know the rule in Deuteronomy.
I was thinking the same thing,
you know?
exactly.
And think about Egypt. Egypt is the bad guys. Is that Egypt are the bad guys? Egypt, the Egyptians are the bad guys. They enslave the children of Israel, and yet what God says, especially as even when you get into like Isaiah 19, God calls Assyria and Egypt my people. So we tend, as we read these texts, we tend to go good guy, bad guy. It's almost like in Judaism where we do Haman, you know, and you every time his name and you do the crank and make noise and boo, hiss. And those are based on solid text. I'm not suggesting otherwise, but what I'm also saying is that look closely at the text, because what I love about the biblical text is that they often surprise us with beautiful things that we might not have seen had we been too hasty in our judgment. I think that's incredible. So
absolutely. Thank you, Ross, for the lesson today.
Hey, thank you, my friend. We'll catch up later this week. I need to talk to you.
Thanks.
All right.
You too. Thank you.
And Julia, shalom, shalom. Good morning. Shabbat shalom. How are you?
Shabbat shalom. Can you hear me?
I can hear you perfectly well.
Okay, so also I wanted to speak about what Clody said too, and I think it helps, at least it helps me to remember when God said all souls are mine.
Yeah.
And that, I think, puts it where it belongs. And I think this wonderful book we have also helps us to understand there are people who are bad and who have descendants that are good, and vice versa.
Yeah.
And that is why everyone has to be judged on what they do. It is imperative, and I think that is what will help. Maybe when we get to the Messianic age, it will help sustain us.
Yeah.
Because that is where it is. You know, people want to say they're better, a certain culture is better, a certain race is better, and it's not true.
Yeah.
Because if you think about who made us, God made this wonderful assortment.
Amen.
Of people. It is glorious because he is eternal, and it's a wonderful thing. And instead of looking around at the wonderful gloriousness and say, look at what he did. People want to use that and say,
Yeah.
you're inferior. And it's a sad thing. It's a sad thing. And it can be there. It's there. The love is there. It always brings to mind for me how very much everyone across the board can be so very loving to animals and pets. Yet you forget that loving needs to start with people.
Yeah.
It needs to start there. And people have it in their heart. I mean, you can find all kind of people who love their animals, who love their pets. It's like, so you have it in there. You just have to remember you need to start with people.
Yeah.
And the other thing I just want to say, I thank you so very much in class for that image of sipping on Grandpa's cough syrup. I had to say thank you. Thank you so much for that.
Yeah, some of those thoughts that hit me, I think some people might say, "Well, I wish you wouldn't say stuff like that," but it's just trying to be real, Julia. That's all.
I loved it. I thank you.
But I think most people know what I mean when I say that. Let me say this on your point about this diversity that God loves so much. Here's something, one of my favorite sights to see every time I go to Israel is as I'm standing in Jerusalem and I see throngs of people walk by, and some are dressed in various religious attire. They might have a long Coptic dress. They might be a Christian group from Africa. A lot of times they'll wear these beautiful tribal clothes, and the whole busload of people match. It's beautiful.
Yeah.
And then you have a cowboy from Alabama, and it's literally red and yellow, black and white. But here's the thing. Every time I see that, I think of Isaiah 2 and Micah 4, and it says that all nations will flow to Jerusalem. And people, a lot of times people think, well, that's yet to come. And I want to say, no. If you lived in Isaiah's time, in the 8th century BCE, Jerusalem didn't have all this like we see. Like, they didn't have thousands and thousands of people flowing through the streets of Jerusalem buying souvenirs. I think Isaiah and Micah, Isaiah 2, Micah 4, I think they actually were shown the modern day. Now, you know what? Some of these people don't believe like I do. Their theology is different than mine. But you know what I see is this beautiful smile exuding. They are searching for the God. This is the land of promise, the holy city. And I think that the sooner we realize, look, if God didn't like variety, we all would look exactly alike, but we don't.
Right.
Hey?
Right. Also, I wanted to talk about, too, when we talk about Korah, can you imagine how much better it would have been had, because, I mean, somebody, and I can't remember who brought up the point that you can imagine that some of them were like, hey, you're not important yet. Let me cover this up. Remember, you stand there until. Can you imagine if it was the opposite? Like, remember, this is all so important. It's so important. Thank you, guys. Thank you for what you do. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
It's the difference of, and it is probably the difference in businesses today, when there are companies that let you know no matter what you are doing, you are important, and I want to thank you.
Yeah.
And it makes a difference.
It really does.
Yeah.
As we say, just be nice. If people could just be nice. I mean, you'd think that wouldn't be that hard, but evidently it is.
Right. Okay. Thank you.
Good stuff. Thank you, Julia. Miriam, Sister Miriam, how are you today? Shabbat Shalom. Let's see if you can unmute that button. There, I see it unmuted.
Shabbat Shalom.
Hey, Shabbat Shalom, my
Can
friend.
you hear me?
We can hear you.
Great. Okay. Julia was great. I'm just gonna kind of continue to what you was talking about with Korah's sons, relatives, family. In Numbers 16, it talks about how they wasn't satisfied with enough. Moshe approached them and told them that in 8 and as of 9 that you Levi's son don't have enough. You want more. You want something that's not yours or what you were assigned to, and therefore, isn't that like breaking one of the Moshe's 10 words? On number 9, I asked, you want something that's for your neighbor, your brother?
Yeah, I hear you. So you're suggesting that it's sort of a form of coveting is to desire something which belongs to another.
Yes.
Yep.
Yeah.
That's an excellent insight, because we tend to think that it's a physical object. Like, like if Miriam, if I have a bracelet that you like and you just, whatever, but it doesn't have to be a physical object. It can be, and in fact, I think that is something very important, because it has to do with what a position that another person holds, or a place in God's work that they, so that's a good point.
But my question as well is, if it's 9, wouldn't they be breaking 10? You shall not hate your brother. Oh, jealousy can turn to that. Envy, strife, you know.
Yeah.
And therefore, Patty made me think about what she brought a statement up in chat. Say, okay, was this the insurrection that began of the priestly sacrificial cult? They just wanted to go away because they couldn't do what they wanted.
That's a good point. I know that that there is a schism, as we call it, that happens among these clans, these Levitical clans, and to the point where some of these laws seem to be originating from the schism. So I don't know. There are different views on the sacrificial system, and I know that. I know that's one of the most controversial things we discuss here. It is one of our, what do we call it, clashing convictions on the Horeb, on our Discord channel. But, when did that come in, and where did it originate? We find evidence in other ancient Near Eastern cultures that sacrifice was a big, big deal. Could it be that some of that comes from Egypt? Karen Clark brings up sometimes her studies on these ancient world cultures, and even this idea that from Aten you have a certain Egyptian presence that seems to pass down into these Levitical texts. So it could be, Miriam. All of that to say, I noticed that whenever you're referencing the 10 words, that covetousness is one of the most important but least studied concepts. I think it's one of the most important because it takes the law to a totally different level. You can say, well, don't kill, don't steal, don't commit adultery. Those are all physical things you do. You go out and do those bad things. But coveting, it really gets at the matter of the heart. So what we see in this lesson today is they desired something that didn't belong to them. And in this case, it was a role. And so that's a good point. Good insights.
Shabbat shalom.
Hey, Shabbat Shalom, my sister. I appreciate
Thank
you.
you. Enjoyed the class.
All right. All right. Well, hang around. You may have some more questions in a minute. Carolyn, how are you, my sister? I see your hand raised. I see your mic is unmuted, or it appears to be. Anything on your end? I don't know. Maybe your volume? I don't know. Okay, I'm going to let you work on that. As soon as it works, you just start talking, and I'll give you a thumbs up because maybe it will. As we say, everybody put your hands toward the screen and pray for her audio to start working, and it might. Now, let me bring up a couple of things. Of course, look, if you have questions, comments, raise your hand. Okay, there you go, Josh. You bailed me out. I was going to have to wing it. How are you, my friend?
Good. How are you, Brother Ross?
Man, I am doing wonderfully. Thanks for asking.
Yep. I enjoyed the class too. It's beautiful. And I also enjoyed the reading of Psalm 42. That happens to be Ruth's favorite psalm.
Oh, wow.
And she says hello to everybody.
Well, hello, Dr. Ruth. Tell her I said hey as well.
She's on baby duty today. I'm going to go relieve her in about an hour.
All right.
You mentioned in class about these Notzadi psalms, and I wonder if we could talk a little bit more about those.
Sure. Yeah, I tell you, it's if you look at those psalms and you go through, you find that they are among many of very, very interesting psalms. Like like I mentioned earlier, obviously the numbers are 42, 43, 44. You work your way through. I just went through and I made some notes. They're very personal psalms. They're not all easy to, in other words, they don't all fit like these are the Psalms of David, this is it. It seems that they have different authors or they have different attributions, but they're all attributed at the base to the sons of Korah. So my question is, and you jump in, Josh, because I really want input on this, especially from people who've recently read them or you think about it. What is this? What do they all have in common? And I went through last night in my notes. This person, let me give you an example. Psalm 42, the soul is panting, thirst, person is crying. He says, my tears have been my food day and night. This person is taunted. This person pours out their soul. They're cast down. Now, if you're a Christian or you come from a Christian background, you think of this psalm because it plays into the passion of Jesus, or Yeshua, if some of you prefer. I know there are Hebrew roots people that can't say Jesus anymore. But the idea is this story comes out and some of these psalms find their way into that narrative. Here's an example. Psalm 42 says, I was leading the procession just days ago. You remember the story. Now, most people, this is a little bit for my Christian friends. Psalm 22 is generally, you remember on the cross where most of the Gospels, I'm a little rusty, but there's this phrase where it says, according to the text, Eli, Eli, lama sabachthani. And you go, what does that mean? You know what most study Bibles say? They point you to Psalm 22. Now, this is a point. I know, Joshua, I'm going a long way around on this question about the Psalms, but here's the thing. The Psalm 22 is not a Notzeach psalm. And I would tell you that is not what Jesus is quoting according to the gospel writer on the cross. Because if you look up Psalm 22, it doesn't say, Eli, Eli, lama sabachthani. It says, Eli, Eli, lama azavtani. So he's not quoting Psalm 22. What I'm going to tell you is look at the Hebrew of Psalm 42 and you'll find the answer, what he's actually quoting. Let me go through. Look, and by the way, Psalm 42, he says, verse 10, as with a deadly wound in my bones, my adversaries taunt me. Whoever this speaker is going through some very, very difficult things. Where is your God? Psalm 43, again, this person feels rejected. They're being oppressed by an enemy. Verse 5, they're cast down. So my point is, if you read these, they present almost a total fascinating picture, a book, a guidebook for a figure. Who is that figure? The reason I'm making that connection there is, if any of you have ever studied the Dead Sea Scrolls, you know that we have these, they're called the Thanksgiving hymns. And what scholars have found is that these fascinating texts, these Thanksgiving hymns, have a first-person narration. And the teacher often is crying out, similar to what we find here. So could this be? The question, the bottom line is, could this be a person who feels rejected? Look at Psalm 44, verse 9. You've rejected us and disgraced us. You have not gone out with our armies. This person feels totally abandoned. And it's over. Look down at verse 15. Disgrace, shame. Verse 16, taunted. You've broken us. You covered us with the shadow of death. I'm down at verse 19 and 20 now. Look at verse 22. For your sake we are killed all the day long. We're regarded as sheep to be slaughtered. This sounds like the suffering servant, doesn't it? Verse 40, chapter 44,
Yeah,
23.
it does.
Awake, why are you sleeping, O Lord?
Mhm.
Who is this that's actually saying that God has fallen asleep? Rouse yourself. Don't reject us. Verse 24. Why do you hide your face? And then you go into chapter 45. It deals with the anointed one. It's a psalm that says in verse 7, therefore God, your God, has anointed you. It's one of the only passages in all of Hebrew scriptures that uses the word Messiah. Interesting. I mean, I could go on and on. You go to chapter 46 and you see some of the same things. What else, Josh? This is a fascinating group of texts. I would say that everyone ought to read these psalms.
I haven't read these together as a group, but you're right. They carry a very similar theme. And who is speaking? If these are the descendants of Korah, I think that'll make for a fascinating study.
And think about
what Karen was.
Yep.
Go ahead.
I was just going to say, think about the way the gospel writers tell the Jesus story. Because some people on this list say, I'm not a Christian, don't believe in Jesus. Just stick with me. My point is, look at what's behind the gospel writers. Like, do they find Jesus in these texts, or do they find him reading and teaching from these texts? For instance, Psalm 84:3, I'm reminded of one of the stories where it says, even the sparrow finds a home, the swallow a nest for herself where she may lay her young. So just some of the language reminds me of what the gospel writers put into the story of Jesus.
Absolutely. Well, the gospel accounts and even Paul, or the writers of the Pauline letters,
Yeah.
they're quoting the Psalms and Isaiah and Jeremiah. I think that there's a lot to be learned from those New Testament writings, and I think it sheds light on first century, second and third century ideas on the prophets and the writers of the Psalms. Just my 2 cents.
One more point.
Um,
One more point on
mhm.
these Psalms. If you look at Psalm 88,
Okay.
verse 3, my soul is full of troubles. My life draws near to Sheol. I'm counted among those who go down to the pit. I have no strength, like one who's set loose among the dead, like the slain that lie in the grave. This person is forgotten, verse 5. Verse 6, cut off. Your wrath lies heavily upon me. Verse 8, shunned. Verse 9, or the end of verse 8, horror. Verse 11, dead. Verse 12, forgotten. 14, cast away. Death. Verse 15, terror, wrath, assaulted, shunned. What I'm suggesting is, and I hadn't looked at this, the study of these Psalms together, like a real study on the Mosaic Psalms in probably 15 years. But
Sure.
15 years ago, I was really into this, and I was thinking, man, it just feels like these are a manual, so to speak, for a suffering servant. So I throw that out to the group to
I
think about.
agree. When I read these together, it sounds to me like the voice of somebody, a composer who's writing about wrestling with feelings like depression. You know, how
Yeah.
do we pray to the Almighty to help us get out of something as deep as emotional depression? It's a very hard thing to do. I mean, and what did they do in antiquity?
Yeah.
They used alcohol, they used drugs. They obviously they had therapy. They could talk to people. They had family to rely on. But when you have an intellectual who's gone so far down the path of delving into the philosophy or theology, however you want to think about it, of how do we get out of these deep, dark places? Not to mention thinking about what did the landscape look like during their time period? If they see society degrading all around them, much like we have today, you go into a very deep, dark place. Everything's falling apart. People have completely turned their back on Moses and the original words of our ancient religious texts. Our traditions are breaking apart. Doesn't look good. So I think that this is a cry, an ancient cry for God to save us.
Yeah.
But also asking the question, what's our responsibility to if God gives us his spiritual help, how do we then come out of this? That's what I read in some of these Psalms.
Yeah.
And I just want to remark on or cap that idea off with Psalm 14. I saw this 2 weeks ago and it stuck with me.
Okay.
Psalm 14, starting in verse 2, it says, from heaven, Hashem observes humankind to see if anyone is using reason to find God.
Yeah.
And there's several different translations. Another one says he's observing humankind to see if anyone has understanding and seeking God. I think these ideas are similar, but using your understanding or your reason to find who God is or who is God, and God's looking for these people.
Right.
That's an interesting thing. And I think that carries through to, I think it's ubiquitous. I think God's looking for people who are using their reason and their understanding to seek him. And that's the cornerstone. I don't want to call it the beginning of wisdom because that's what Solomon called that, the fear of the Almighty, but they're very much tied together, in my opinion.
Right.
So when you're in the depths of seeing everything breaking apart around you and you're seeing all this suffering, the suffering servant, the person who's trying to serve God the best of their understanding, and they're seeing all these things break down. That's the cry. You're right. It does. It absolutely, all of these Psalms really revolve around this idea of what seems like a suffering servant.
It's a very interesting study. It's worth a look. And like I said, it's been a while since I looked at it, but I encourage people, as you have time this week, to read through those Psalms. Just think about it. Think about who is the Notseach. Is it the choir master? Maybe I'm wrong. Maybe it's just, hey, where do you get choir master from? That's not that anyway. I encourage it for people to look at. I do see some questions on YouTube I'm going to pick up, but Josh, keep going. If you got more, I want you to. I don't want to cut you short. I just wanted to pick some of these up too. You good?
Yeah, those are the only ideas that I was thinking about this morning. Like I said, I really enjoyed the class. I think, that's everybody got a lot out of it this morning. I certainly did. But the Psalms that you're focusing on right now, and I'd like to know who this person is too. It can't be a choir master.
Yeah.
That's
Yeah. Who
that's
is
a
it?
that's a very 14th century British idea.
Right. And I don't have anything against choirs or choir masters. I'm just saying.
That was
But
my
stick
first
around.
job as a professional musician.
There you go. Stick around. Tell Dr. Ruth I said hey, by the way, and
I
when
sure will.
if you have trouble when it's your turn to babysit, holler at me. I happen to be an expert. I am an authority on that. I know more about babies than I know about the Bible, so please feel free to call.
Thank you, sir.
A couple of questions just to pick up on. I'll kind of work my way back through. One is Anita is asking which verse I was talking about in the class today, and was it the Jeremiah one? And I see that others, Eric and Lee, and maybe a couple of others have jumped in to help with those. When I was talking about the idea in the Hebrew Bible where the person that sins dies and one can't die for the sins of another, the main text that I went through today in the class, and there are a few others, but the main ones, Deuteronomy 24:16, it very clearly says that the person that sins dies. If you go to Jeremiah 31, verse 29 and 30, according to the Hebrew text, I saw another question about which versification am I using. I use depending, and I usually say that's the Hebrew or the English. So in the Hebrew, chapter 31 of Jeremiah, verse 29 and 30 says very clearly, by the way, this leads into the new covenant. It says that the fathers, it's not going to be said, this proverb is not going to be said that the fathers ate sour grapes, the children's teeth are set on edge. In other words, sin is passed down. That's not going to be said anymore. Who taught you this proverb? Jeremiah says. And then the next verse gets into, behold, days are coming when I'll make a new covenant. I find that interesting. Ezekiel chapter 18. I think I read only the first 4 verses, but read the whole chapter, Ezekiel 18. It gives examples of how the person that sins is responsible for their own sin, and someone else can't do anything about that. Obviously, Ezekiel 33 is very much the same thing. The other thing, and I want to touch on this, shifting gears, is that Tracy Osborne asked, what is the verse that you said, my God, from the mouth of Yeshua refers to? What everyone will say is what Eric typed in YouTube chat. Eric typed the verse that most people suggest that's coming from. So in the Gospels, when Yeshua says, or Jesus of Nazareth says, according to the writers of the Gospels, from the cross, my God, why have you forsaken me? It's in English, it's in Hebrew or Aramaic, Eli, Eli, lama sabachthani. This, most people say that's Aramaic for my God, why have you forsaken me? Technically, that's right. But what they'll do is they'll footnote that to Psalm 22:2. If you go to Psalm 22:2, remember, we're all about horizontal reading. You find a verse and it seems to point to another, go look at the other. Psalm 22 does not say, Eli, Eli, lama sabachthani. Psalm 22 says, Eli, Eli, lama azavtani. Now, azav and sabach can be, similar in meaning. But what I suggest is if someone will go to Psalm 42 and look at, wait a minute, let me close that window. Psalm 42 and verse 10, it's been a while. Let me see if I'm right. Psalm 42 and verse 10, it says, let's see, it says, and they will say to God, my rock, lama. Now notice it says shachaktani. Say to God, my rock, lama shachaktani. Very close. In late Hebrew, or biblical Hebrew, the letter bait and the letter kaf do look similar. Some of you study Hebrew. So I propose that this is where the gospel writer, and there is some confusion based on the narration in the Gospels and the Synoptics. What's he saying? Is he calling for Elijah? Someone, a narrator, says, no. He's not calling on Elijah. He's quoting Psalm 22. But he's not quoting Psalm 22. So hopefully that makes sense. I would encourage you to read, if you're interested in the Gospels, to read that narration. My God, why have you forsaken me? And look at the Hebrew of Psalm 22:2 and Psalm 42:10. Those are just some of my thoughts. Now, who else? Anyone else have their hand raised? Yeah, we got a couple. Todd and Angel. Give me some good stuff. What you got?
Well, I'll go ahead and add on to what I was doing earlier. It was interesting to do the class today with Light's not doing it, but Freeman's Bible, when he did, the different translations and stuff in it. It was interesting how it jumped from the Jehovah writings to the priestly writings, going back and forth. Because I was thinking about that last night. I was like, you know what? I'm going to do that class with that book because I want to see how the different writings are.
Yep.
And how they kind of intertwine together. And like I was telling her, the redactor that put together the Bible, when he shows up in there, it's almost like he's a narrator.
Mm-hmm.
And this is what this part's about.
Yep.
And it's just kind of interesting, and something that we were talking about a couple of weeks ago. I think Karen's one that brought it up, but it's about how it's possible that the slavery in Egypt was not as bad as we would think it is. And you mentioned where Korah told Moses, where he says, you say you're bringing us to a land of milk and honey. We just came from a land of milk and honey. You took us out of it.
Yeah.
How is it a land of milk and honey if you were abused?
Yeah, we were sitting there eating our watermelons and leeks. It was nice. I mean,
Yeah.
what do you...
Well, it's interesting because I remembered where that came from, and during your class I went to Exodus 2, and the very last verse in Exodus 2, of course, now, all of Exodus chapter 2 is done by the Jehovah writer. But the very last verse, which just seems completely out of sort, is a priestly writing when it says, and the children of Israel groaned from the work, and they cried out, and their wail went up to God from the work. And, and you heard the moaning and this, that, and the other. And it's just interesting that's just in there.
Yeah.
And it was the priestly writing that did it. Everything else was Jehovah writing. I just thought that was really interesting.
Yeah, it is. It's fascinating to look at. Now, some might be listening to us and they don't know what we're talking about. Maybe they're new, but I would say that the theory is that the Pentateuch, the 5 books as we have it, have come together as various source texts. So you have as you hear Todd talking, you have a priestly writer. They're all priestly writers to some degree, but you have a priestly writer, and you have J, and you have E. Now, some don't, even modern scholars, not all scholars agree with the documentary hypothesis. But if you understand that, forget documentary hypothesis, if you understand that we have different sources which tell the story differently. To your point, Todd, I think when you look at these texts, when we go through Numbers chapter 16, does he show, at least according to his view, different writers? Because I'm interested. I may have packed that book. I'm in the middle of packing, and so some of my books are already packed. Oh, hold on one sec.
16 was, okay.
I can listen. I just didn't want my headphones to come
okay.
up.
Well, in 16, when you were reading it, especially at the beginning of it, when it says, and Korah, son of Ishar, and everything, and son of Levi, that skips down to took 250 people
Yeah.
from the children of Israel. Now that's the priestly version.
Yeah.
The Jehovah version adds in and Dathan and Abram and Eliab and On, son of Peleth, and everything. But it's just interesting. I find this book to be interesting because you can read whatever
Version.
Let's say you just want to do the priestly.
Yeah.
And you can read that, and then you can turn right around and read the Jehovah version of it, and it makes you see it in a different way. It
Yeah.
almost makes you understand it.
Let me pick up on one point you just made, Todd, because it's very important. We're talking about the Bible with sources revealed, a new view into the 5 books of Moses by Richard Elliott Friedman. Again, this is an academic approach to solving the problem of multiple sources. So he's got it color coded. So he says his view is that J, the author that scholars refer to as J, this was devised in Germany in the 19th century. If I just read this, the chapter 16, his version of J says, and Datan and Aviram, sons of Eliab and On, son of Pelat, son of Reuben, got up in front of Moses, and Moses sent to call Datan and Aviram. I'm skipped down to verse 12 where the story picks up again. And we won't come up. It's a small thing. You brought us out. Now, I just did that quickly to make this point. What people have long noticed is that if you read Numbers, you get this account that says you got this big insurrection made up of Korah, Datan, Aviram, On, and 250 Israelite chieftains. You get to Deuteronomy 11, and Deuteronomy 11 doesn't know that story. This is the view of scholarship. And you go, well, how would they say that? Because Deuteronomy 11 mentions this insurrection, but it only mentions Datan and Abiram. And you say, well, maybe Moses is just like, he doesn't mention Korah. He doesn't mention Korah? So you get to Psalm 106, it's the same thing. It's Datan and Abiram only, no mention of Korah. So a lot of scholars believe that we have different stories of who was involved in the insurrection. And I know that that doesn't make everyone feel comfortable, but we have other examples of different sources which have different characters as well. If you read the book of Exodus, you have Jethro, Ruel, Hobab, depending on which source you're reading, his father, Moses' father-in-law, and he sees Moses attending the people. Well, they're lined up like to a rock concert. And he says, what are you doing out there? And he says, well, you know, it's my job. It's a long day, I know, but every day I listen to their problems. And he goes, you're going to get worn out. You need to pick leaders over the masses, rulers over tens and so forth. You get to Deuteronomy, and Moses tells the story there first person and never mentions Jethro. In fact, Jethro is not mentioned at all in Deuteronomy. So the question becomes, which is which? Which happened?
Well, Peter says the same thing in the recognitions. He said when he was talking about, you know what I'm talking about?
Yeah.
Where he was mentioning to Clement about, you know, what's not originally in Torah. I mean, who did he get it from? I mean,
yeah.
You know, or who did Peter learn this from? I wonder. And so it's interesting where he says, you know, do you actually think that Moses took advice from a Midian priest?
Yeah.
From a pagan priest?
Yeah. Doesn't he ask the question? I'm going back a ways, but doesn't he ask the question, which is greater, Moses or Jethro? For Jethro gives advice to,
Mm-hmm.
It's been a while.
Kind of going to the same thing like we were talking about not too long ago, but the irony of how people do things, because the Jews have Moses, where the Christians have Jesus.
Yeah.
And so, well, we know he talked to Moses.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, but the thing is, how much did he really talk to Moses? Because we know some of it's been added in. So, how much did he talk to him? But
that's the fun stuff.
We'll never know the answer. That's the problem.
Well, the fun part is the search and making careful study of these things, with prayer and fasting and focus. I think those are the keys. So
Yeah.
this is fun stuff. I think so anyway.
Well, now she told me earlier, she goes, well, now I'm going to have to get a copy of that book too.
Which, this book?
Yeah.
Oh yeah, it's hard. Isn't that funny? Like, you think, well, we can share it, but every time you want to read it, he's going to be reading it. So you got to get your own copy. Absolutely. I tell you what, sometimes depends too. Like, a lot of these are available on iPad. Depends. Some people say, "No, I like a written."
I'm like that.
I thought that I would just start, saving space and not getting books and put a lot on my iPad. But I end up, if I like a book, I'll get a copy, a hard copy, a printed copy, and on the iPad. So, not saving any money. I need to fix vehicles, right? I have vehicles broke down, and I'm still buying books. So, anyway, good
Yeah, 'cause
stuff.
a lot of times she'll ask me, "Are you done with that book yet?"
Yeah, I appreciate that. All right, Eric, I see you up there. I saw that you said, and thank you for straightening that out, that Hobob is Billy Bob's cousin. Is that right?
That's the way I understand it.
Good deal.
That's from the Louisiana genealogy.
That's right. That's right. Good deal. What you got, brother?
Well, I had two things at least, and I've only written them down, so I have to say it's two. One is it was brought to my attention that almost all of the time they were in Egypt, they were servants, but they had the best land. The lights didn't go out. They always had food. It was the greenest, luscious land ever. But then the Pharaoh came that didn't remember Joseph.
Yeah.
And I just noticed that Julia said something about, they were starting to be, well, they're doing like the Egyptian, be like an Egyptian, you're going to be like an Egyptian, and idolaters and stuff. And that kind of rang true. But so, I mean, they could, I'm thinking, remember the good old days before the Pharaoh. It was the land of milk and honey.
Yeah.
Because they had to come down there. There was nothing to eat anywhere in the world except in Egypt with Joseph.
Yeah.
Anyway, that was just a one observation. The other one is more along the line of all the Psalms. Of course, I'm studying with Laser, and he's doing a whole series on the Psalms and has taken the mantle, if you will, of translating them with a more day-to-day English than what most of our Bibles have now.
Right.
And I was wondering, in scholarship, has anybody like Friedman gone through and systematically looked at the language in the Psalms to see if there are different writers?
Yes.
Because, it as is said about the 5 books of Moses, he wrote them all. David wrote all the Psalms according to that tradition. And they explain it away. Well, I don't want to say explain it away. They explain it very clearly of why David, and it's all part of their tradition in the oral Torah, a lot of it. And I was just wondering if there were literary differences between the compositions of these various psalms.
Yes, that's an excellent question. There is a lot out there on the Psalms, and some of the best works in the academic world, I find to be some of the best work, are from the Anchor Bible series, and Anchor. Expensive, and I only have a few of the books of the Bible, of the Anchor Bible commentary, but I noticed Eric Castaneda is saying that he uses the same program I do, which is fabulous, the Accordance Bible. And Accordance, in fact, the website is accordancebible.com, and different people if you want to spend money and get a Bible program for your iPad, your iOS, your whatever, or your computer, it's got a lot of fabulous tools, and it includes Anchor Bible is one of the modules you can get. Now, the more you spend, I mean, you can spend as much money as you could possibly have and more to get what you need on there, but that's just one option. But as I recall, one of the books that I read years ago on the Psalms from an academic standpoint that I found very helpful, and Eric, if you'll allow me, I'll go back when we're done here and find it and make sure, but I think the name is Mowinkle. Mowinkle is a scholar who did a lot in the Psalms and gave some good academic.
Is that the cousin of Bullwinkle?
Bullwinkle and Mowinkle. I think that's it. Yeah. Yeah. I tell you the other thing that's very helpful as an English Bible, you know, I always tell people, you can get the New Oxford Annotated. I have that Bible, and I love that Bible. I mean, I really do. And, you know, for a long time I said, no, I'm only going to carry the Tanakh. And generally, that's still my view. My scripture is the Hebrew Bible, the Tanakh. So my favorite Bible that I use, my Hebrew Bible, is the BHS, Biblia Hebraica Stuttgartensia. But if I need an English Bible, and I do, I really like the Jewish Study Bible. I'm not a big fan of the JPS. In fact, I don't like any Jewish translations. I'm sorry. I know some people get upset when I say that, but I like more of a literal translation, and I don't like stone Chumash. I don't like, I'm kind of picky. But I can go with the JPS, and I like it okay, even though it's not literal enough for me. I can always look at the Hebrew. But the notes are fantastic in the Jewish Study Bible. And now mine is leather bound. I bought a leather bound and then had it recovered. They only have a hardback now, but you can find it. The Jewish Study Bible. In fact, I'll post a link so you don't get the wrong one. But
I've suddenly started really enjoying, because of listening to Laser, and he always reads the Hebrew first.
Yep.
And trying to pick up how to say certain words. Of course, you've got the two different schools of pronunciation.
Yeah.
And then I found that, I think you mentioned it one time, the BART app that you can get that has the Hebrew, English, and transliteration all through it. It's quite interesting, and it sure helps me try to figure out what is he saying. Of course, it's so fast when you listen, as far as I'm concerned.
Yeah.
You know, I follow English quite well, but that's about it.
Well, that's our goal. Our goal is to get as close to the original, see my fingers, original, as we can. And so, you know, for me, I want to definitely, I spend most of my time in the, what we call the Masoretic text. But the Masoretic text is late. It is very, very late. Now, that doesn't mean it's not based at times on early manuscripts. But, you know, people who believe, okay, well, I read the Hebrew Bible, I use the Masoretic text, and thank God Almighty, I'm free at last, and I've arrived, and this is the whole truth, nothing but the truth. Well, get a BHS and open any page, and you'll find all of the references to earlier manuscripts, many of which preserve, I think, better readings. And so we've got Dead Sea Scrolls, we've got the Septuagint, and people can say what they want, but the Septuagint reads quite differently in many cases than the Hebrew, and not just because it's a different language. Same thing with the Samaritan. Yep, go ahead, Eric.
We need all of those together. You know, I mean, to get the full picture of what's going on. I mean, I really think, and this group may agree, but others not, we need to have the consideration of documentary theory and all of those translations to try to get back there. And then you just mentioned the Dead Sea Scrolls. If I remember, there aren't any of the Psalms in the Dead Sea Scrolls, or are there some?
Oh yeah, definitely. The Psalms are some of the most frequently found manuscripts. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. Yeah, in fact, I keep looking around. My library this is hard for me. I'm in the middle of a move, so I'm trying, I go, well, I don't want to box that up yet. Oh, good. I still see some of my Dead Sea Scroll books are out, but Eugene Ulrich is the man on the planet. We say, you the man, Eugene Ulrich, as far as the Bible at the Dead Sea. And he's published, he's the editor, I guess, of all the biblical scrolls have been released. I have in Hebrew any substantial fragment. If it's got a word that can be read, pretty much it's in there.
Yeah.
It's 3 volumes. I bought the paperback edition, but I have all 3. The Torah, basically, I don't think it's broken into Torah, prophets, and Psalms, but it covers all of the Hebrew Bible text.
Okay.
But as far as the English version of the Psalms, I'm going to look, but I would say that the Jewish Study Bible, the notes on the Psalms are very, very good. And there's quite a bit out there, but I've even thought about at some point doing a study on the Psalms, and we've got several studies backed up, so don't think I'm going to get myself distracted here. We're as soon as we get settled in, we're going to be working to put out some Northern Prophet stuff, but eventually we'll get around to studying the Psalms, and I think I'm looking forward to that very much. So, hey, good stuff.
Thanks.
All right, let's see who else has their hand raised. Anyone? Okay. Looks like you are exhausted. Everyone is done talking, maybe? I don't know. There's some good conversation on YouTube as well. I'm trying to follow that as well. I think I've addressed some of the questions. Some of you're a good audience and good Bible students and teachers that you are. You're helping one another out and providing answers. Anita asked what app, and I think Eric had mentioned a certain app, so maybe he can put that in again in case if he has the patience to do that. So there's some good stuff out there, and look, I want to encourage people to go into the Discord, into Horeb, and put some of these discussions. That is set up for you, so you can give us your thoughts and comments. Clody, I see your hand.
Just a quick question.
Sure.
Have you noted many similarities between Ezekiel and Jeremiah?
I have noted there is quite a bit of correlation, and here's why. Because Ezekiel is not on an island. Like, what I try to tell people is, when you study, particularly the prophets, you have to put it in context. You have to look at the time and the dates. Let's go to Ezekiel chapter 1. And just so I give you an example of what we're looking at here, and it says in chapter 1, verse 1, in the 30th year, we don't know 30th of what, but stick with me, on the 5th day of the 4th month, when I was in the community of exiles by the Chabar Canal, the heavens opened and I saw visions of God. Now, I want to know, when did this vision take place? Can I put a date on it? 30th doesn't answer it, but let's keep going. On the 5th day of the month, it was the 5th year of the exile of King Jehoiakim. The word of God came to the priest Ezekiel, son of Buzi. So now, all of a sudden, I understand that we're in the 5th year of the exile of Jehoiakim. I can date that because I've got I've got the book of Kings, but 2 Kings, but I also have the prophet Jeremiah. So if you go through, and this is an excellent exercise, you go through, you're going to find that over and over he uses dates that correspond to the time of Jeremiah. What we've got is Ezekiel very early on is exiled to Babylon, and he's being shown visions of what's going on in Jerusalem. Guess who's there? Jeremiah. So you have to study Jeremiah and Ezekiel together. So let's look at chapter 8. I'm just flipping through. In chapter 8, verse 1, 6th year, on the 5th day of the 6th month, I was sitting at home. The elders of Judah were sitting before me, and there the hand of the Lord God fell upon me. Now, what are we talking about here? Do I understand what year? We've already got an establishment to set the date if we go back to Ezekiel chapter 1. Look at, let me just give a couple more examples. You go back to, I may not take too much longer to do this, but as you go through, you're going to see dates over and over to the point where we even get a date for the death of Ezekiel's wife later, and it ties in with Jerusalem. So the correlation, to answer your question, Clody, is there the two prophets are married in a sense, meaning the events that they're witnessing are simultaneous. They're going on. What's going on in Jerusalem, Ezekiel is in Babylon, and he's even seeing prophetically from Babylon the things that are happening in Jerusalem. So I think they are connected. Hopefully that made some sense anyway. Does that help answer anything?
No, it really made a big impression. The thing with the sour teeth and the fathers, it's exactly the same saying. It's exactly the same. So it's not like that's a proverb that we have found it through Tanakh or other prophets and other books of the Bible.
I got you.
So it's only these two, and it's like, okay, I understand that it's mostly similar times, and perhaps the Ruach Elohim, the spirit of Yehovah, is similar to these two prophets. But then again, it makes me wonder if there is some common source.
Absolutely. Your point is very well taken. Ezekiel 18, we can really basically put a date on it, and it is in the middle of the same thing that's going on in Jeremiah 31. So these two prophets are both, so this tells us something. To your point, Clody, excellent observation. At the time, as we approach the destruction of the temple, one thing really became a proverb. Everybody was saying it. Well, the fathers ate sour grapes, and the children's teeth are set on edge. See, they want to distance themselves from the bad things that are happening and say, it's not our fault. The fathers, they sinned, and now we're reaping. And what Jeremiah and Ezekiel are saying is, no. That's not true. You can at any point straighten this thing out if you turn around. One more date that I want to give. Look at chapter 24 of Ezekiel, verse 1. In the 9th year, on the 10th day of the 10th month, the word of the Lord came to me, O mortal, record this date, this very date, for this very day the king of Babylon has laid siege to Jerusalem. Further, speak in an allegory to the rebellious breed and say to them, thus says the Lord God, put the cauldron on the fire, put it on, and then pour water on it. So let me explain what's going on here. Ezekiel is in Babylon, and God tells him, mark this day, this date, this very date, because the king of Babylon is hitting Jerusalem. Well, guess what? It is that day. That's what's happening. So all the way in Jerusalem, that's happening. Ezekiel is told, put the cauldron on the fire. You remember what Jeremiah's first vision in Jeremiah 1:3? He says, what do you see, Jeremiah? He said, I see a cauldron. I see a pot. It's tilted from the north. You see, so they're seeing, they're like tandem. They're what do you call synchronized prophecy? And your point, I'm going to be thinking about that today, Clody. Even though I've noticed, obviously, that Ezekiel and Jeremiah, they both have this prophetic glimpse of the father's eating sour grapes, children's teeth set on edge. I've not really thought about it like I am now based on what you just said. That means that at that very time, the people were trying to push off the responsibility of the destruction. Good point. Good observation.
So also, I think if we relate also the 70 years that we read in Daniel,
Yeah.
then people do have a point when they say that father ate sour grapes and our teeth are on edge.
Yeah. Yeah, good point. Yeah, if you read through those side by side, like in fact, when I was teaching through, I did the Jeremiah series, 25 lessons on Jeremiah. Towards the end, I started tying together the Ezekiel connections as I could. But I remember reading in that study when I got to Ezekiel 24, and I was looking at the destruction of the temple, because this is live action. This is, or Ezekiel gets the message in Babylon that this is it, that they're destroying the temple now, and here's the lesson he gets. Think about how horrible these prophets had it sometimes. Chapter 24 of Ezekiel, verse 15. The word of the Lord came to me, Son of man, I am about to take away the delight of your eyes from you through pestilence, but you shall not lament or weep or let your tears flow. Moan softly. Observe no mourning for the dead. Put on your turban and put your sandals on your feet. Don't cover over your upper lip and don't eat the bread of comforters. Listen, in the evening, my wife died. You see, and then he gets into, just as the delight of his eyes, which was supposed to be a house of prayer for all people, it's being burned right now, Ezekiel, so you know the pain. Now, this is tragic, but it's simultaneous that the things happening in Jerusalem and Babylon overlap. Interesting. Good points.
It looks to me like prophets are the extremity of empathetic people.
Yeah. Yep. I mean, you look at all the lives. You Hosea, God says, just as my wife is like a prostitute, I need you to go marry a prostitute. And it's like such painful lessons that these prophets have to learn. That's why when I see someone claiming to be a prophet today, because they want the prestige and the fancy cars, and I mean, it just makes me nauseous, because I'm thinking, you are not at all you're not a biblical prophet. I don't know what you are. You might spell prophet Profit, but you're not a Prophet prophet. Different kind of prophet, right? Good stuff.
Yep. Mm.
What else? What else, Clody?
No, that's all.
Okay.
I really liked the correlation between those two, and I was like, okay, this parallel teaching brings other things.
Yes.
Gives you an altogether other point of view, and it's like you stay above. You don't stay. You don't get the the regular whatever chronologic
Yep.
reading. You see the whole thing. It's like a 3D look
Yeah.
in the whole things that were happening during those times. I
Yep.
really thank you about this parallel reading that you planted in our, at least in my head.
Yeah, mine too. I mean, it has revolutionized the way I think about the biblical text. I see Eric Castaneda says Daniel, he's talking about Daniel on the YouTube chat, and I wanted to say that if you want to tie all of this together, also you look at Daniel, because Daniel as well, it's like the horizontal reading continues. You have to look at, as we work through these texts, you have to see, because Daniel gives dates assigned to the same, a little bit later, but the dates, a lot of academics will show that there's a little bit of a conflict there. But again, it's not only is it a way to make sense of things, but it also, when we look at things side by side, things that don't fit, that don't make sense, stand out. See, it's like the horizontal reading method reveals the good and the bad, and I think at times it's going to help us to identify the lying pen of the scribes. Honestly, that's what it's going to do. Good stuff. All right, Todd and Angel.
Hi.
Hey, Angel.
And you're referring to Jeremiah 31:29. I was in and out dealing with my daughter for a little bit.
Gotcha.
But it's, in those days they shall no more say, the fathers have eaten sour grapes and the children's teeth are set on edge. But what days is he referring to? And, that makes me think, even today, we still have to pay for the sins of our fathers. Like, not specifically like we have to die for what they did, but we do have to, we do have to face the consequences of our parents' choices. Both our parents, singularly and collectively, as a nation and a country and a world.
Generational curse.
Yep. So let me just ask you then, take that a little bit further, and you quite possibly have some insights. Feel free to share more on that subject. Because I know what I said, but I really want to make sure I understand your point in that. What are your thinking on, as particularly for the new covenant and one dying for the sins of another? That was my point in the class. Does that not make sense, or is there another view that I missed?
Oh, no, I'm in complete agreement with you that one person cannot die for the sins of another.
I got you. But we can still. Yeah.
I was just thinking, like, in a larger term, I guess in a different view of it would be like, just look at how we've trashed the earth that we were given dominion over.
Sure.
For one thing, that's one thing. There's microplastics in the water that have been put there by our parents.
Yep.
And that's just one example. There are thousands of others.
Let me chime in here real quick.
Yeah.
Because I know exactly what Angel's talking about. And Angel, correct me if I'm wrong. It's this idea that we're paying for not only the teachings and the traditions that we've inherited from our parents, but also their actions. Mm-hmm. I think what we're seeing from the biblical text is we're supposed to realize that we're not paying for their sins. Everybody knows, and I think that even the ancient people well understood that in some sense we're going to pay for, or at least have to deal with, what our parents and our grandparents gave to us. Is that kind of along the same lines as you're thinking?
Yes, but both culturally and also, within a family, you have the family dynamics that, for instance, drug abuse and things like that are considered generational curses, but it's things that are learned in the family dynamics that are the sins of the parents that get passed on to the children.
Right. And
All
just
of that.
one thing that, as I hear you guys discuss it, I believe too in consequences that affect generations. So for instance, if I'm an abusive, if I'm an alcoholic, if I abuse my family, and then they, some people repeat those things they learned, this, well, my daddy did that to me, and, or my mama taught me that, so that kind of thing passes on. And so I believe that you and I can break a cycle of bad behavior or change the course of an entire generation by saying, I will not do that because I had it done to me.
And I think that's the point of the biblical text.
Yeah.
Ross nailed it.
Yeah.
That's exactly what I was going to say.
Yeah, it's so there is a connection there, and so I don't mean to suggest that, no, you can live however you want and it's not going to affect your kids by any stretch. So I'm with you, Angel, I understand that. I think what tends to happen, though, is that, not always, but I think the thing they're addressing, both Ezekiel and Jeremiah, is this: don't say that, in fact, in this case, it's the kids who are saying, hey, well, you can't blame me for this. My parents did. It's their fault. So it's saying, no, you're saying that your parents ate sour grapes. Your teeth are set on edge. Understand that's not the way this works. So it could almost, this is a question as much as anything, Angel or anyone, could it be that the question posed to the generation, maybe then and should be now, is are there things you can do to break that cycle, to take ownership and responsibility for microplastics, for bad dietary habits that we've learned, for abuse of alcohol or other chemical dependencies? And the answer to that is you can. And it's not easy. It's not necessarily easy. We have generations of families who have been hurt and injured and even destroyed because of what they grew up with, and it's difficult. Anyway, I don't know if that helped or hurt, but I know what you mean now. I get it. Anything else, Angel?
No, that's all. I think Clody summed it up really nicely in the comments. She said, so we do not pay for their sins, but we are affected.
Yeah, good point. Absolutely. Well, thanks for that. Charles Sutton. How are you, Brother Charles?
I am well, brother. You know that I depend heavily on Ezekiel 18 theologically, but there are passages where we're encouraged to confess our sins and the sins of our fathers. And so I'm just seeking some understanding or modification, wondering if the documentary hypothesis explains, or maybe those passages of confessing the sins of our fathers as well as ours are maybe sourced differently from, for instance, Ezekiel or Jeremiah.
Excellent question. Well, let me say first off, and I say this whenever I need to, I don't know. Meaning I don't know if the source criticism is going to answer that question, but here's something I will say. When you read, for instance, Daniel chapter 9, Daniel is confessing, it's a beautiful prayer. He's calling out to God. He says, look, our fathers have sinned, we've sinned, and there is nothing wrong with that, whatever the sources might indicate as we work through the text. It's an admission that, who am I but dust and ashes? I am a part of the problem, as were my fathers, as were their fathers. So I think that those don't have to be mutually exclusive, if that makes any sense. it's not that I have to say they sinned and therefore I sinned. I think when you get into confess your sins and your father's sins, I think it is an admission that we're on the wrong path. All we like sheep have been led astray. Now, what is it that we need to do to get back on the path? Maybe that's kind of what it is. Does that make sense? Does it help or?
Thank you. Yes, that helps. I just wondered if anyone knew about whether we have different sources here or whether I need to blend that which I depend on.
Yeah.
With encouragement to consider history, my personal family history.
Yeah.
Consider.
Well, I think part of the conversation we just had with Angel's comments too. It's like I think we can always look for how can we improve this generation over the previous generation. I had a discussion with my oldest son not too long ago, and it was a good, healthy discussion. You know, sometimes your first child gets the brunt of our stupidity, our not knowing how to be a parent, and I mean, just face it. And we had a very healthy conversation about things I could have done better, and did ultimately do better. By the time you have 2 and 3 and 4 and 5 and 6, and then 9 grandkids later, and I just about have it figured out now. But it's taken a long time. So I think as we think about not only what we have done and can do to close that gap, I think it's easy for me to think about how I was raised and the problems in that generation and so forth, and it is something I think we should pray about. So we'll give that some more thought, Charles. And if you come up with, I know you're a studier too, if you come up with something, post it up on the Discord, and maybe others would jump in and have some good commentary on that. Good stuff. Sister
Thank you
Miriam.
for considering it.
Oh yeah, man. Good thought. Miriam, yes.
Okay, you hear me?
Yep. I can hear you.
Okay. We went over Exodus 6, where it talks about on the hundreds of years people lived. And we can barely make it out of the hundreds these days. I don't want to make a big issue of the topic and discuss it all, but that's mind-blowing to me. Why we are dying so young at these ages, and they live hundreds of years back then.
Yeah.
But that's not my point.
Right.
I just want to bring that up. But you did say in the class, remind you in chat, in Zoom, if there are any other descendants of Adam. You told us to remind you of that. Ask you that question.
Well, I don't.
Are there other descendants of Adam?
I don't and correct me if I'm wrong.
Aaron. I'm sorry.
Okay. All right.
Okay, I'm sorry.
Okay.
I write bad.
That's all right. That's all right. So first of all, on the ages, that is an excellent question. And what we do see is that as we progress in the biblical accounts, once you get out of the pre-flood stages, you see a drastic reduction in the ages. And so some people who are very literal in their understanding of the text, who say, no, I really think that say Methuselah was 969 years old and so forth. I mean, there are people who say, no, it says it and I believe it. I'm not here to take that away from you. So some would say, yeah, after after the flood, the environment was so changed that people just didn't live as long. You know, there was some sort of heaviness of the water above the firmament, below, and so forth, and maybe that caused people to live longer. I don't know. But what we find is that by the time we get to the post-flood life, it says there's an interesting phrase in the Noah literature where it says that the days of man shall be 120 years. And so that tends to be, according to the biblical writers, the ideal age that we should, all things going well, make it that long. Now, having said that, you don't see it very often. In fact, the psalmist would say, if you make it to 70 by strength and 80 and, and so forth. So, but I'm shooting for 120 for me and you. I want us both to make it to 120. So, in good health, I might add. Now, as far as the thing I said to remind me of, I think what I intended to say was, the biblical writers from Numbers chapter 4 on really want us to say that the only person, the only family that can become a priest are the sons of Aaron. And my question is, are they the only ones? Does the Bible know of others? Now, what I'd like to do is almost leave these as questions and wrap our discussion up. So I'm going to kind of throw something at the group and then walk out like a revival preacher that stirs up a congregation and goes home. I'm going to leave you to deal with this week. Think about this. King David, there are two texts which really strike me. In fact, we're going to read these, Miriam. Go with me to 2 Samuel chapter 6. It's talking about David. And it says in verse 13, 2 Samuel 6:13. Now, what's happening here is David is bringing the ark into Jerusalem. And it says in verse 13, when the bearers of the ark of the Lord. Now, we know now, you all learned this today if you didn't know it before. This is talking about the Kohathites. This is talking about a certain group who bear the ark. That doesn't mean just it. So here it is, the Kohathites. When the bearers of the ark of the Lord had moved forward 6 paces, he, David, sacrificed an ox and a fatling, is what the text says here. By the way, if you read in the Dead Sea Scrolls, it says he sacrificed 7 oxen and 7 rams. That's another class. Verse 14, David whirled with all his might before the Lord, and David was girt with the linen ephod. Now, a linen ephod is a priestly garment. And my question is, what is David doing wearing an ephod? Now, before people dismiss that as just not meaning anything, look down at verse 18. When David finished sacrificing the burnt offerings and the offerings of well-being, he blessed the people in the name of the Lord of hosts. Now, that doesn't say, and I know people might say, yeah, it means somebody else is doing the sacrificing, but David is doing the sacrificing. Now, remember, Saul gets in trouble for assuming priestly responsibilities. But David is wearing an ephod. He's sacrificing. Look at chapter 8, 2 Samuel 8:18. Benaiah, son of Jehoiada, was commander of the Kerethites and the Pelethites, and David's sons were priests. 2 Samuel 8:18. Now, some translations change that because they say, wait a minute, no. David can't, his family, he can't be a priest. His sons can't be a priest because he's from Judah. Remember, he's even got Moabite in him. He can't be a priest, nor can his sons be priests. But the text here says David's sons were Kohanim. Now, the other thing people do is they say, yeah, but Kohanim doesn't have to mean priest. Let me tell you who says that. The people who say Kohanim doesn't mean priest all the time are people who need a word to be defined to make their theology work. So I'm suggesting that somehow, some way, David is functioning at times as a priest, a Cohen, and he's not Levitical. He's not only is he not Levitical, he is not a Kohathite, and yet he is involved in some of these things. Now, the other question, and this is just a question, thanks, by the way, Miriam, for reminding me, because I want people to think about this one. Not only David, but think of Samuel. Samuel is a priest and a prophet. What is Samuel's genealogy? Is Samuel a Levite in all of our sources, or are there sources that tell us about Samuel which seem to suggest that he is not Levitical? So there you have it. Miriam, you reminded me, and I'm going to give that as sort of a encouragement for people to do a little homework and ask those questions. Are there priests in the Bible, and I'm not talking about Melchizedek, that's another story altogether, who are priests, but they're not Levites? And what about, are there any prophecies which suggest that there are going to be priests which are selected from something other than the Levites? Is that fair? Can I give that piece of fun homework to people? Now, you may not decide to take me up on it, but if you do, I promise you it's going to be a fun study. So, hey, I've had a good time.
Great. Shabbat shalom to all.
Hey, Shabbat shalom to you, my sister.
Shabbat shalom to all.
Have a beautiful day, and I'm going to let you guys go, and we're going to have, hopefully all of you have a wonderful the rest of your Sabbath and a good week coming up. We've got some exciting things coming this week. We are in the midst of the move. Be patient with us. We're working tirelessly, and I mean that, a lot of hours trying to get everything done. Our goal, remember, we have to be out of this place by the end of the month and into the new place by the end of the month. The 2 jobs going on. Seth and I are going to be working to, like, this place looks horrible. I'm not going to lie to you. These books behind me, they're not even my regular books behind me. See that? See the different color books? What I want to do is, this is going to be the last thing, is we're going to unplug the camera here and the fancy setup and put it in place there and go live whatever day that is. But in the meantime, we have to load boxes. My wife is making curtains for us, and man, anyway, thank God for Seth and Bridget, and I'm going to probably get the rest of my family to help load up boxes, and we'll do some. Anyway, you shouldn't feel a thing. It should all be perfect, just a transition. Have a beautiful day. Have a beautiful week. God bless you. See you next time. Same channel. Shavua Tov.